Welcome to our panel, Climate Cuisine. You may ask, what is climate cuisine? There's a growing group of us who call ourselves climatarians, as Dar said. We dine with the earth in mind. We make food choices based on foods that regenerate the planet, not hurt it or pollute it or put chemicals in it, but actually renew the planet. Foods that have a low climate impact. So what are those foods? Well, by way of answering that, I'll tell you what set me on this path. I'm a foodie, I'm a locavore, and I got involved with starting the Slow Food East End chapter because I wanted to keep our region in farming and fishing. I'm dedicated to local. So my question to myself was, can food help reverse global warming? And I've asked my colleague, Mark Hobner, also of Drawdown East End, to share the slides. This is where, if you can see the full slide, mine's a little odd on my computer, but there's Mark, there's Paul Hawken, who inspired me. And if you can see that pie chart, land use and food is 24% of greenhouse gases and electricity is 25%. So that kind of wowed me. I said, wow, food is where I can make a difference. Mark, can you turn slides? Next slide. Here we go. Food is number one in the drawdown ranked their solutions, and food turns out to be, reducing food waste turns out to be number one. It's in US households. That's because 40% of our food is wasted, wasting all those resources. It's like buying $100 worth of food and just dropping $40, before you even get to the car. 70% is wasted at the household level. That's about $1,500 per family, per year. And on a global basis, 10% of the greenhouse gases from food waste, the food waste, reducing food waste would reduce greenhouse gases 10% on a global scale. And the UN has a pathway to zero carbon by saying 50 by 30. If we reduce our food waste by 50%, we can reach that UN goal by 2030. So yes, I can reduce my food waste 50% or better, I think. Next slide, here we go. Climate cuisine. So I learned about climate cuisine. It's cuisine with a low carbon impact. There was an article in the New York Times talking about Vietnamese cuisine and Indian and Venezuelan and Mediterranean. What do they all share? They all share an emphasis on local, seasonal, and perennial foods. That's foods like lentils and nuts and olive oil and garlic and tree fruits and berry fruits. And then the Times coined the term climatarian, which according to Wikipedia, it's a diet with no strict rules, as much as mindfulness about food production, where food comes from, and where it goes, with the intention to reverse global warming. So climatarians eat well, they reduce their food waste, they have a huge impact on the climate. So finally, I made up a little memory trigger for myself, which is slow. Climatarians dine with the earth in mind, and when I go shopping, I think seasonal. That's when things are deliciously ripe. Local, I love local, farm stands first, or farmers markets. Organic and regenerative, that's things that are chemical free, that restore nature, types of foods that sequester carbon, like oysters, you were hearing about before, and grass-grazed meats, which you'll be hearing about today. And finally, waste nothing. The number one solution, it saves money. We actually have a shelf in our fridge. We call it Savor for Pizza because a lot of leftovers make great pizza toppings. Cook creatively, compost the rest, zero to the landfill. And that is basically eating like a climatarian and enjoying all the health benefits. So I asked my husband 2 Christmases ago to make a compost. I asked him for a compost for Christmas, and he created a very low-key one in our backyard. Now we use everything, and we send zero to the landfill. And, you know, we were talking about heritage before with one of the other panels, and I just wanted to say a word about food traditions, because a lot of them are, a lot of our heritage traditions in our own families are seasonal and local. Mine, from Eastern Long Island, we have a tradition of shopping at farm stands and fish markets. And some of my favorite dishes are the ones I remember from my grandmother: clam pie, or my dad's oyster stew, or Tom's dad's favorite, baked Alaska cod in milk and potatoes. It's just delicious. And of course, any leftovers we save for lunch, which leads me to introduce our first panelist, Ellen Greaves. Ellen is a private chef in Southampton, a graduate of La Varenne Ecole de Cuisine, formerly of the Quilted Giraffe, and Tea Box, Takashimaya, New York City. She's co-author of Simple Menus for the Bento Box and co-creator of Must Go Soup. She's dedicated to reducing food waste and composting. Welcome, Ellen. And can you talk a little bit about your Must Go Soup and why, as a chef, you got so interested in it?
Hi, yes. I'm Ellen Greaves. I'm a chef. I worked in the restaurant industry in New York and Toronto for about 20 years. And then when we had children, that didn't work so well. So I'm working as a private chef now. I wanted to talk about cooking with the climate in mind, sourcing, prepping, cooking, and afterwards with an emphasis on systems that have worked for me. Waste reduction for me is all about systems and dedication. Family is important. My grandmother taught me to, when I break an egg, crack it, empty it, and then to scrape out that last little bit, because food was precious. She brought her kids up in the Depression, which was hard. And she had a bit of a Depression mindset. I want to use the same techniques she used, but with more of a joyous mindset and a deep respect for ingredients and all the efforts that went into making them. You talked about shopping. I shop locally. I start in my garden if I can. I grow what I can. I thought I would be self-sufficient by vegetables by now, but I realized that when the vegetables are growing, I'm cooking long days. And so what I do grow is herbs. I like the fact that the deer don't eat the herbs. They're perennial. I can grow thyme, chives, rosemary, mint, a lot of mint, oregano. They do just fine. I go out and I snip a few branches when I need them, and there's no packaging involved and no shipping. So you asked about my vegetables, my Must Go soup.
Yeah.
I hope the recipe's in the chat. I'm going to hold it up against. Please capture this if you can't get it from the chat. I love this recipe. Somehow maybe we'll get it to you. Everything in the fridge that must go. I've been making this for a while now, and I start with oils or fats. I keep oils and fats in my fridge. Like you, I have zones in my refrigerator for different things. I find it helps to keep me organized so that the new stuff gets used last and the old stuff gets used first. So we are omnivores, so we keep chicken fat, bacon fat, things like that. I find that makes a great start for the soup, unless I'm cooking for vegetarians. Something in the onion family, if we have the other half of the onion from last night, maybe some leek greens that need to be used up. I save garlic for later because it can burn. And then anything that's hard. We're all cooking a lot of kale these days. I find kale stems are just fine to add to a soup. Part of what I've discovered as a climatarian is that I like to look at the plant root to tip. How can I use all of that plant? Some bits are easy to use. The kale, nice leafy greens, those are simple. The stem's a little tougher, a little harder, but it's got nice flavor. So I cut it across the grain. That's a technique I find very helpful for making tough foods much more manageable. The end of the celery, as long as it's not dirty, that goes in there. All the bits and pieces from the fridge that I'm having trouble getting rid of. The French actually add salad with the dressing to their soups. I liked that technique. Bring all that to a boil with whatever liquids are available. I always have homemade chicken stock. I often have homemade vegetable stock. I save the salt from feta. I find that's a great seasoning ingredient. I make Parmesan broth from I end up with a lot of Parmesan rinds at the end of the summer, so I just make broth and then I throw a cup of that in if I need that. If I'm simmering green vegetables or if I'm squeezing frozen spinach, I save those bits. One technique I've found that's helpful is to have a container in the freezer, and sometimes I squeeze a lot of spinach. I stick that in the freezer. When it's full, it's usually time to make some sort of soup. So I simmer all that together, and once it's soft, my blender is my friend, makes everything smooth. I strain because occasionally there's a fibrous something that didn't get in there. And if I have some nice bits and I want to make a chunky brothy soup, I'll add nice small chunks of potato, carrot, something like that, so that the spoon is fun. I have some good flavor boosters if when I taste it, it doesn't taste good or strong enough. Ginger garlic soy sauce, miso, tahini, little bit of caper vinegar, kimchi liquid, pickle liquid. I have a lot of uses for pickle liquid, actually. My brother uses my mother-in-law's potato salad recipe, and he ends up with leftover pickles because he uses the liquid in the potato salad. So I like looking at everything that comes into my kitchen and try and use every single little bit of it. I liked the idea of being a dedicated composter or food waste reduction person. Part of that is having a dedicated space in my fridge for the bits that need to be used up. And part of it is having a dedicated day, usually on Sunday, when I also water the houseplants. If I do that, I find I waste less food. Thank you, Mary.
Well, that's fantastic, Ellen. Can you tell us a little bit about your composting that you do out here?
Oh, I love
Long Island?
composting. Yes, that was one of the real benefits of moving into our own house. I was a composter as a child. It was always a bit of an issue. Who's going to take out the compost? But once I grew up, I lived in New York City. I was not willing to take 2 subways and a taxi to compost. When we got a house, it was such a joy to set up a compost. And Southampton town at that point was subsidizing compost bins. I think they sold you a $70 bin for $10 or something like that. That bin is still out there. That's what I started with. I've met other people who used that same program and bought their first compost bin. We compost everything from home. I take my compost buckets to work with me when I work in clients' houses, and I bring that home. And one day when I was at East End Food Institute peeling carrots, a ton of carrots, so many, I looked around and said, so where does your compost go? And that led through conversation to a program where I bring home a couple of buckets a week. They then started producing a lot of compost, and we're sharing the joy now with ECI, my local Hampton Bays environmental group. And we're composting all of their compostables.
Fantastic. I read about that. It's wonderful that you were inspiring to them. I love that. Thank you, Ellen. And let's now introduce Tom Geppel, who's a farmer, owner of 8 Hands Farm in Cutchogue, a 28-acre livestock and produce farm, a farm store, cafe, and butcher shop. He farms organically and regeneratively, and I think you'll have some of his links in the chat box. So Tom, welcome. Can you tell us a little bit about 8 Hands Farm and Market and your grass-fed organically raised meats?
Thank you for the introduction. Yes, we started our farm on a rented field in 2010, 2011 timeframe. We were on a rented field, no electric, no water. And part of that was by design to kind of see if we had what it took to be in farming and start farming instead of just throwing money at it. But the main reason why we got into farming was Food Inc. Many of you have probably seen Food Inc. It's probably a little old at this point now, and there's many, many more documentaries out nowadays that are talking about farming and animals and the soil and everything else. But that was our first intro to farming, and seeing Joel Salatin, who's with Polyface Farms in Virginia, on there. He's the kooky guy with the pigs with a really big hat. And so we looked him up, we read his books, we visited his farm, and really it was, my wife Carol was talking about raising some chickens or something on our property. We have 2 acres here in Mattituck. And I had the great idea of buying a farm and doing it on a larger scale with regard to the community. So now we're probably farming, we own 28 acres, but we're farming over 60 acres right now, mostly, all in pasture other than 3 acres that we have for our garden. But part of it was really to kind of be a part of the change of from industrial agriculture. When you see CAFOs, which are confinement animal feeding operations, and you see how animals are treated, they're not even able to express themselves in their natural way. Slaughterhouses, you just go down the line, you look at the chemicals that are in all of it, the feeds and everything else, and you just say, we got to do something. We have to do something, if not for others, at least for ourselves. And that's been the biggest benefit for us. And our kids were 6 and 10 at the time. And my daughter's a senior in college now, so think about that, right? But it was really around getting giving them an exposure to it as well. It wasn't something that we wanted to start after I retired as a second career. So we started it while our kids were young, so that they can be familiar with the farm and the animals and everything else that goes on. So I essentially worked 2 careers for 10 years. I recently retired from the city as an accountant for 32 years. So now I'm farming full time, and it's, 7 days a week for sure. Some of the things, so where we started and where we're at now, there's been such a change, both in the information flow about regenerative farming, information flow with regard to food, meat, all of that kind of stuff that's come up. And part of the thing that's unfortunate is that it seems like all meat and all animals and all farming gets kind of lumped into one category, especially when you talk about climate change. And that's unfortunate, but we're seeing a change in that. You have Sacred Cow, if anyone's ever read that, it's from Diana Rogers. Great book, great concept on regenerative farming. And those are things that we've learned. We never went into this saying, hey, we want to start a regenerative farm. We want to put solar panels on. We want to do this. We want to do, it was really just trying to do something different for the animals, something different from industrial agriculture, and really for the health and the things that you learn along the way. And that you see firsthand. In other words, we're not just talking about this conceptually, but we've seen our farm was farmed by an organic farmer for 5 years before we bought it. It's a very rocky farm. So we're out there and you see, and the soil wasn't great. It was really a lot of rocks. It was a thin soil. Now, 10 years later, after running broilers and chickens and sheep and cows and goats across the property, we have a nice deep soil. We have grows great. We don't use fertilizers. We use our compost from the barns and from our animals, and we till that into the garden. So we don't even have to use chemicals. We don't use anything to amend the soil or anything. And the soil's alive is really what you've learned. And what the most notable thing is, when we run broilers across the field, they're in a 10 by 28 hut that we bring them, and they're mostly in a hut so that hawks and predators don't eat them because they're small and everybody wants to eat a chicken. So we move them every day, another 28 feet onto fresh grass. But what's amazing is 2-3 weeks after that, you look down the pasture and you see a 10-foot swath of just beautiful, foot deep, beautiful green grass. So you're doing something really well for the soil, something great for the pasture. And then our animals follow up behind that and eat the grass. So at our farm, we raise pretty much everything you could think about, right? At this point, we raise pigs, heritage pigs on pasture, We raise lamb, we have goats, we have ducks, we have broilers, we have laying hens, we have turkeys, what else? And cows. We just got cows last year. So that's why we have the additional land. But as everybody knows, or maybe doesn't know, a ruminant animal, which are your cows, goats, and sheep, are only supposed to eat grass. Okay, so that's all our animals eat. They eat organic hay as well on top of that in the wintertime when there's not grass available. Otherwise, they're rotated around the pasture. To me, it really made a lot of sense, and everything has to be logical in that you start on a 1/4 acre piece where your animals are grazing. You let them graze there for 2-3 days. You move them to the next piece. 30 days later, you come around and that first piece is now regrown from the sun and the rain and the nutrients that the animals left behind, and you start that process all over again. And in the meantime, you run some other animals through that. But getting back to the ruminant animals are really only supposed to eat grass. And those animals have a great benefit to our climate in that they're eating the grass, and it's not necessarily the animals that are giving out to the climate, it's the soil and it's the grass that's sequestering carbon out of the atmosphere. Now, to differentiate what we do as a regenerative farm versus industrialized agriculture, probably around 70% of the grains that are grown in this country are fed to animals that are not supposed to be eating grain. Okay, so there's one focus point right there where you can reduce the carbon footprint by not growing grains for animals that are not supposed to be eating grains. Put them on the grass, don't till the soil. And one of the biggest things that we find when it comes to regenerative farm is the soil needs to be alive. And that's the key, that if anyone takes away anything from any conversation around farming and regenerative farming, or any kind of farming for that matter, it's that soil needs to be alive. That soil is what pulls carbon out of the atmosphere. The minute you kill that soil, till it, do anything that would otherwise kill all the microbes in that soil, releases carbon into the atmosphere. So you think about a feedlot that doesn't have any soil and it just has manure all over the place, which is basically throwing carbon up into the atmosphere. And unfortunately, I don't want to burst anybody's bubble, but there's a different way to kind of do it. When we all talk about, you all see the commercials out there, all the fast food companies doing plant-based this, plant-based that. It's great for the environment. As it relates to confinement animal feedlots, I totally agree. But as it relates to plants, please understand what plants it is that you're eating. You know, GMO soy, GMO corn, all those things that are grown on these sterile fields that are sprayed with glyphosate and sprayed with so many chemicals, where that soil is not even alive, isn't doing anything for the environment. Every time it's plowed, it releases carbon into the atmosphere, and it doesn't help anything with regard to climate. So that's really how, you know, what we've learned over this period of time of doing this is everything about it starts at the soil. Whether it's our nutrition for our bodies needs to come out of a soil that's alive, that can release those nutrients into the plant that you're eating, as well as for the animals themselves. And keeping that soil alive is what's going to pull carbon out of the atmosphere and really help our climate. So what we should be doing and not focusing on is not stop eating meat. It's eating meat, but only eat meat. One, that you can talk to the farmer and see what they do. And two, is that from a regenerative farm. Other than that, if you can shrink down your meat consumption, I think you're doing a lot for the environment. But definitely promote it, meat from regenerative farms, because I can tell you, grass doesn't grow without animals on it. Animals adding the nutrients to the soil, just like when the buffalo used to roam across the plains and they would move across. That adds all that fertility to that soil, which kind of helps our atmosphere pull that carbon out of that. Like I said, I can go for a long time, but I don't know if there's questions, but you know, just to sum up with our farm is we're very mission based. Okay, I didn't spend 32 years in accounting, so now I could work harder than I've ever worked in farming. The one thing that we see as a challenge for regenerative farms is the narrative around, you know, not the meats, the farms, and protecting land, not really looking at food generation on those properties. So I can tell you, I'm probably regulated by at least 6 different agencies between USDA, FDA, and I'm treated the same as some big manufacturing facility. Not to mention the town that you're in doesn't really necessarily understand what it is that you do, and this different concept on farming versus growing a field of cauliflower and selling it to the wholesale market. Now we have animals, and I need to do a butcher shop. I need to do because I can't sell into the wholesale market and make a living. So all of that is the change that everybody needs to embrace. But our mission is really to bring community together, to kind of lead by example, to get others to kind of see that it's possible to do that, a direct market to your customers, and engage in a community level farming. And that, you know, we've seen during this pandemic that globalization as it relates to food doesn't work. It just doesn't work. It needs this. So ideally on the East End, it's great that I'm one of the few, you know, places that are doing what we're doing, but just the East End alone could use 50 different farms with different markets and doing all these things on land that's most of the time fallow land that can be used for animal agriculture for sure. But we have probably around 10 employees now on between our kitchen, between our prepared foods that we do, between our butchering, between our farm help. And, you know, all the animals, you know, are able to express themselves in their natural way. Our chickens are outside scratching around, eating bugs, doing what they're ever doing, what they feel like doing. Our pigs get able to run around, roam around and root. And, you know, pigs will destroy pasture, and pigs do eat grain, just so everybody knows. You know, there's no such thing as a grass-fed pig, in case anybody tries to sell you that. Or there are pasture-raised pigs, which mean they're out on pasture. They're able to stick their snouts in the soil and till that up. And I can tell you that's a fertile soil. And as long as you keep it planted with pasture, you're going to be doing good for the environment. And then human health and nutrition. I mean, that's the one misperception, is the nutrient density of meat. It doesn't mean you need a 24-ounce steak, but it's so densely nutritious that even in third world countries, you know, versus feeding beans, you know, to have a little piece of meat is going to go a lot further for feeding the population than it is for plants or substitutes for that meat, I should say. So those are the things that we've learned over this time. But I'll stop there, Mary, in case there's any questions or
There are a bunch. Thank
Okay.
you, Tom. That's great. And there are a bunch of questions in the chat box. I think we're going to get to them later, but I
Okay.
did want to mention that, you know, with Joe Salatin, he's the fellow who coined, it's not the cow, it's the how.
Yeah, that's out
Yeah, it's the
of
how.
Sacred Cow too. Yeah.
Exactly. And could you just say a word or two about your market? It's open like
Sure.
on Thursdays, and like what's some of the more popular things that people ask for?
Well, we do all of our deli meats, which are very popular, our own bacon. We have we get everything. And the one thing that what we wanted to do to differentiate, and I think people can appreciate this, is that if you wanted to start a farm and you didn't have a butcher shop and a way to sell it, basically what you're relegated to is bringing your animals to a USDA facility. That facility will cut and cryovac and freeze your product. That's it. They can't give you a raw product that has to be frozen. Okay, so there's a lot of things missing in that equation, which is the people cutting your meat at the processor are not good butchers to start with. Secondarily, it's frozen and cryovac. And so it's a challenge. So you can basically do farmers markets and things like that. But for us, what was important was to actually have the whole carcass back so that our butchers can then break it down, do things that are custom. And so part of that is we do our own bacon. We do our own deli hams, we do a roast beef, we do pastrami, and all our patés and charcuterie, we do all of that. And then all of our fresh meats, we make sausage every week. Pork chops are out of this world, but the first thing people will notice is that our meats, our chicken that has beautiful yellow fat all over it, actually has flavor and taste versus the gray, pale stuff that you end up seeing in the supermarket. And it's filled with nutrition. So you can feel good about eating all that. But all our case is filled every week. We're open Thursday to Sunday. And that's pretty much because we can't open more days because we need a few days to be able to do butchering and make the sausage and make all of our prepared foods. But for those of you that don't want to actually come and get meat and go home and cook it, we also do prepared foods because we realize our market is not just a bunch of foodies that want to go home and cook. So we make with our product, with our meats, we'll do like a matzo ball soup we did this week with chicken, our own stock, everything else. I think we did like 30 or 40 quarts. By Thursday, when we open after the morning, that was already sold out. So that goes on the list. We need to make more of that. But we'll do shepherd's pie, things like that. And then we do fresh breads, sourdough breads with organic flour. You know, the simple things that is how we would like to eat is what we're preparing. So anything that we're making, if it's a soup, it has organic vegetables and it's nothing commodity based. We try and do that as local as possible if we don't grow it ourselves.
Oh, fantastic. I can tell you, you're the farm stand first that we stop at on Thursdays or Fridays or Saturdays or Sundays. Awesome. And, you know, we use everything like, you know, Ellen said, everything becomes a fantastic soup, you know, whatever leftover there is, it's unbelievably delicious.
Yeah. And we, just to get back, we do a full composting. The great thing is we have natural recyclers too. So our pigs will eat all of our scraps from the kitchen. Our chickens will eat all that, whether it be eggshells or whatever it is, and everything else goes in the compost pile, then turned and then put back into the garden pretty much, and then tilled in. But I think I saw a comment come up. It's 8 Hands Farm, the number 8 Hands Farm. Just think of my wife and I and our 2 kids, our 8 hands. So, and then we have Instagram for the other things that we're making for the week. But every week we go in and we make different things. It's not always the same thing also. So just definitely keep track of us. And I do send a weekly newsletter out with farm happenings and what our menu is for the week. So you can sign up for that on our website as well at 8handsfarm.com.
I encourage everyone to check it out. It's a wonderful experience just to go and see everything.
And hopefully we'll start with some tours soon, once we kind of get out of this, the mask and, have a little bit more freedom, we'll get out and we'll make sure we can do some tours for people too.
Thank you, Tom. That was fantastic. Really great. Very comprehensive. Let's bring into the conversation Chef Jason Casey. He's a private chef, Culinary Institute of America graduate, author of the Shelter Island 36 cookbook. He's committed to fresh, seasonal, and sustainable ingredients. And I believe his information is in the chat as well. Chef Jason, we'd love to hear your take on super local and your focus on seasonal and sustainable foods.
Oh, perfect. Thanks so much. I'm very happy to be here. As a personal chef and a resident of the East End of Long Island, I was very happy to be able to, create a cookbook that really focuses on what the East End, can showcase. I base it on, New England style recipes to give it a location. And, the East End of Long Island and Long Island as a whole is such a great place for fresh, seasonal, and sustainable ingredients. My motto of bold, unmasked flavors, I, create recipes with that. And using those specific ingredients, you don't need to add, a great array of sauces or, ingredients that are going to mask the natural flavors that you're trying to get out. One thing that comes to mind is during the summer, I am a huge fan of carrots. And I get all of my carrots from Indian Neck Organic Farm, and their carrot tastes like no one else's carrot. It is just amazing, the depth of flavor in the raw state and what can come out of it in the cooked state. I've also posted a recipe today on my Instagram for a duck ragu. Duck is one of these products that we love here on the East End of Long Island. Crescent ducks, local. They produce a great product for anyone to access. The ragu is a great dish because you can have different vegetables that are winter associated, rutabaga, carrots, all these fresh things, even adding greens to it, which I think a lot of people kind of forget. Adding greens into your braised dishes is essential. Get those vitamins in during the winter time is essential for, during the winter time. I think little pops of flavor of doing things pre the winter. For example, I love smaller farm stands, specifically Lil Farm Stand in Cutchogue. Jenny and Mike, they do a great job with their tomatoes. I purposely overbought tomatoes, so I was able to sun dry and dehydrate some, so I have in my freezer, so I could add a little pop of flavor and obviously color to the dish in the middle of winter, which is just absolutely delicious. Another product that I'm a big fan of and advocate for is, cooking products at home, such as hot sauce. I've become a huge fan of hot sauce over the past 10 years. Jenny and Mike at Little Farm Stand produce all of my peppers for that hot sauce, which is a zero waste hot sauce. I do a 50-day fermentation. All of the product is used. Once everything is done and everything is strained out, that mash, I dehydrate. That mash goes into my barbecue rub. It goes into numerous recipes that I create for my clients and myself. And it also just enhances the flavors of the products, the local products that I'm using. and it really makes a world of difference. You know, the farmers on the East End, you create a relationship with. I feel fortunate to call, Will and Lucy, my friends over at Sangley Farm, Jenny and Mike at Little Farm Stand, and all the farm stands. I'm a huge fan at Seps, and also in Southold this summer, Old Stand Farm Stand, where were great with working with me with products that I knew that I was going to need throughout the summer for specific clients, and they grew them for me. So even being able to talk to farmers early in the season, if there's something you haven't seen around, they're happy to work on it with you. One product that I'm hopefully going to see from some local farmers is Culantro. We're all familiar with cilantro, but no one ever sees Culantro. I do quite a bit of cooking in Puerto Rico at times, and Culantro is one of the base staple herbs that really makes food what it is. On top of that, my cookbook, The Shelter Island 36, does focus a lot on seafood. We have a great seafood base on the east end of Long Island. I'm a huge fisherman, but I'm also anyone who I take out on my boat or I take kayaking with me. We focus on, only keeping what we know we're going to eat that day or the next day, and that's it. I'm not a fan of freezing those meats. I like to use them while they're available and in season. And the flavors that come out of these fish and shellfish is remarkable. I have done a lot of work with the Cornell Marine Program using their oysters. This summer, I promoted a recipe using their oysters and rosé, the Firefly rosé from Lens, making instead of a beurre blanc sauce, I did a rosé beurre using the rosé as a reduction sauce, and you get this beautiful pink color. So you have a combination of the land and the sea in terms of using the wine and the oysters. And I wood fire roast them, and it's just a wonderful dish that everyone is a big fan of. Another zero waste product I wanted to talk about is I'm a big fan of making ceviche during the summer with the seafood that I catch. And there's a lot of, lemons, limes, oranges, and the zest I find to be so flavorful, sometimes more flavorful than the juice. And so there is not one single lemon, lime, or orange that does not get zested ahead of time, which I will make citrus salt. I'll add into marinades and rubs. And I think the thought process of trying to use every part of that product is something that I think a lot of people it falls by the wayside, especially if you're not composting. It's good to use as much of the products as you can before it, has to be discarded.
Fantastic. Oh my gosh, those recipes. So I'm interested that you mentioned food waste, because I wasn't sure I know you're so involved with seasonal and local. And I'm wondering if your clients, are they asking for more seasonal and local foods these days? Or is it, what's happening with your clientele? Are they interested in that?
They are. I usually have to start that conversation of saying that, what specific farm stand I was at and what I saw that's available now, not a product that, I don't want to try to have a tomato salad on the menu in the early spring when that's not the season for tomatoes. I try to guide them. And, with all of my years as a private chef, everyone usually is happy to, change menu items and go with what I know is available and best, whether it be, even fish. I think there are certain fish that obviously everyone love, fluke that is local, even porgies. I think one fish that gets a bad rap is sea robin. I was fortunate a few years ago to work with Chef Adam and Elizabeth at 18 Bay on Shelter Island, and we cooked. I helped them cook at the James Beard House in the city, and their main course was sea robin. We made a wonderful sauce out of the bodies. The fish was cooked to perfection, and I have showcased sea robin as a fish sandwich, turning it into a French mousseline and then frying that. And it's hands down one of the best fish sandwiches I've ever had, something that's super local, super sustainable, and is a crowd favorite.
Wow. So your winning argument is the seasonal it's delicious. Is that,
Yes,
I
it
mean,
is. It is
yeah.
very delicious.
Yeah.
And on my own, if a client is not at, the residents that I normally cook for are not themselves composting, anything that I make for them, especially at their residence, I take back with me. I am curating, luckily I am a resident of the East End and I have a large backyard. I'm curating my own garden for myself and doing my own composting and looking forward to some wonderful produce and herbs just for my personal use this year, on top of, shopping at all of the wonderful local farms.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I love everything you're saying, and it's very inspirational.
Oh, good.
We do have some questions in the chat box. Someone's asking you about how could we make healthy cooking easier for people in a hurry? Healthy, seasonal, and local.
Gotcha. I find I tell people, everyone is in a rush, and I do understand that. You do have to allot the time to go to a farm stand, to do the research, and it really isn't a ton of time. Everyone thinks it is, but once you've kind of got your base down, you're able to curate the menu that you want. I think food prepping for most people has been a big mainstay, especially the past year and a half of pandemic. Everyone's home. They have a little bit more time to be in the kitchen. And I think, having those meal plans ready to go, you can really focus on making those healthy meals and doing that one day of prep and having everything ready for the week.
Yeah, definitely. I think people are afraid of fish, but broiling fish is about one of the easiest things you can do. Do you have any tips for that?
Yeah, I, as someone who, fishes quite a bit, and also I really enjoy the butchery of fish, being able to get every ounce of meat off in one pass. I have found that just showcasing as a cooking lesson, I do cooking lessons for people as well. And a lot of people, instead of a whole meal, they're just looking to learn how to cut vegetables correctly. They're learning how to prepare the fish correctly. And when they actually realize that it only takes 2 or 3 minutes to cook a fish on either side, and you have perfection. So it's more so showing. I do have a lot of information on my Instagram page. I post videos all the time. I'm also happy to go to a client's house and show them exactly how to do things the correct way.
Great resource. You're a great resource. That's fantastic. I noticed, Mark, I think we've got some other questions in the chat box.
Sure.
There was a question about kelp, and for Tom Geppel about, does he feed his livestock kelp? Were there other questions? Maybe Tom, you could field that one.
Yeah, I do actually give kelp. So I was interested when I was hearing that conversation earlier and saying that I think it was Sean, where he's going up. I know he wants to work with not-for-profits and everything, but he was going up to Stone Barns. But I'm pretty close that we could trial. I have cows. I have every animal you could imagine. But I do feed. I get it from North American Kelp out of Maine right now, and I probably do a ton a year of dried kelp. But I'm game for trying anything. I know it has a lot of micronutrients and it's really good for the animals, and they love it. So
yeah. Chef Casey, have you cooked with kelp at all?
I have cooked with kelp in minor occasions, making Hawaiian style poke. I will use local kelp seaweeds in that. I really like that fresh bite of ocean flavor. Really can make a dish stand out.
Yeah, definitely. And I'd like to bring in Chef Ellen. Have you ever added kelp to your must-go soup? I don't know. Maybe she's still not. She's not.
There we go. Here I am. Sorry. Yes. I haven't ever had kelp to add to my musko soup, but I used to work at Takashimaya Tea Box Cafe, and we made dashi all the time. And that has a nice strip of kelp in it to add some glutamate to it. And I used to cut that up into nibbleable sizes and snack on it through service. It was very healthy.
Is it
and
something
tasty.
you cook, you boil it first, or?
No, you don't boil it. They're very fussy about that. You bring the water up to just a simmer, add your bonito flakes, add your piece of kelp, let it sit for, it's the shortest stock I have ever made in my life. It sits for about 5 minutes. You strain it, and that's where I start nibbling on the kelp and use the bonito, the dashi, for cooking.
Fantastic. Wow.
Yeah,
Mark,
I can't wait to get our local kelp.
I know, right? Have
Yeah.
you been reading the chat box, Mark? Can you field a question for us?
Yeah, of course. Thanks so much. And I'm sorry for being late to the party. I was here for 2.5 hours under an alias, so Joe didn't have a chance to find me. I want to know from Tom, we're talking about behavior changes, and of course this goes for eating as well as farming, but how do we get farmers, conventional farmers, to move to no-till and cover cropping?
Yeah, good luck. The
That's a
key
tough
there is
question, right?
conventional
That's
farming.
the short answer.
Yeah. Well, I think part of it is education, like anything else, and showing the benefits of the soil and a living soil. But the contradiction is a conventional farmer is using chemicals that are killing the soil anyway. So you have to get to the point of trying to convince them that keeping the soil alive is better for whatever it is that you're growing. Part of what Chef Jason was talking about before is the carrots, right? I mean, when you have good soil and nutritious, alive soil, those vegetables taste amazing. And most of the people, when you're eating a fresh tomato and they walk away and be like, oh my gosh, I've never had something like that, it's because of the soil. So listen, I drove down 48, Route 48, and I see the sod farms that are still pulling sod in December and cutting sod up, and it just leaves an entire, soil field out there with no cover crops. I think if we want to start anywhere, it's got to be in those places. And then the way to kind of almost force people to do it, I think, everybody gets in. If I were town supervisor, or had a control over the property tax system, is that we incentivize people to do agriculture by giving them an ag assessment, right? But we don't qualify what that agriculture is. So a sod farmer is getting that same ag assessment reduction as I am. As well as a nursery or any place else. So I think it has to, some change has to happen in that to incentivize. No different than trying to get people to start regenerative farms. We're subsidizing all of these monocrop soybean farmers in the Midwest. You should be subsidizing and incentivizing regenerative farmers to kind of start up and giving them some seed money to start. So I think the pocketbook is probably the first place to start, fortunately or unfortunately.
Totally. No, and there is a push for that, to pay farmers to carbon farm, that kind of thing. And there was a question, Mark asked a question that was already in the chat about incentivizing farmers to use regenerative practices. And the three of you really are an example of businesses that are doing well, thriving out here on Eastern Long Island, because people do want local and seasonal and regenerative organic foods. I think it's you're showing what we can do here, or what we can keep and what we can protect.
I think part of that, Mary, is
Yeah.
a discussion. Like Chef Jason, who's not just gonna say, okay, I'm going to do a tomato salad in December or in the spring, right? He's going to not push back, but he's going to give suggestions for eating seasonally. And the more all of us kind of pay that forward on things that we've learned and things that we've experienced, and try and gently talk to other people about those sort of things and get them on board, it's a winner. Just as soon as somebody starts tasting that and eating seasonally and starts to feel better, everything tastes better, that's a winning combination. It's just a matter of us, people talking about it.
Yeah, totally. I totally agree with that. Nudging your family and friends to start eating more seasonally. We absolutely do that here. I have a sister-in-law who will not, she wants to have her Italian cooking when she wants it, but she's starting to listen. We sing the praises of things in season. Strawberries in June, it couldn't be better,
Yeah. But canning is key, right? I mean, we can our tomatoes. We're almost sold out of our tomato, but we grow a San Marzano, we can it. So you can have a nice tomato sauce in January that's from your farm. So canning is something that, trust me, you couldn't get canning jars through the pandemic, and you still can't get a lot of them. So I think people are canning a lot, but that's a way to preserve whatever it is you're growing and then enjoy it in the wintertime as well. And it's still seasonal.
Absolutely. And I remember Chef Jason said sun drying tomatoes and then freezing them, which is what I do too.
Yeah.
And so easy. And then you have that delicious flavor in the middle of winter.
Absolutely.
I'm looking at the chat box. Other questions, Mark? Did you pick up any?
Yeah, let me pull this one up for Chef Ellen here. How do we get people to actually see vegetable trimmings as a resource for ourselves and take the extra effort to throw them into a bucket in the freezer?
Absolutely. Well, you can even go across the aisle on this one. I always start by saying, why would you waste anything that you've taken the trouble to bring home, that someone has taken the trouble to grow? Just look for it and find a way to make it work. There are a ton of recipes out there. I know that Food 52, which is a food website that I follow, has a lot of, I think they call it scrap food or no waste recipes or root to tip recipes. It's out there if you look for it. And you can incentivize it. Either you're doing the right thing by the earth by not having it go to a landfill and create methane, or if your audience is not receptive to that, everyone wants to know about thrift. Everyone likes to think, I earned my money, I'm going to spend it and then use it wisely. So if I buy the carrot, I've been turning the tops into green musco soup. And then the little bit between the top of the carrot and the leafy part, that goes in the compost because that's usually kind of dirty and hard to get clean.
Absolutely. And also, you know, the UN, their food goal, which is if we can all reduce our food waste by 50% by 2030, we will have reached the goal of drawdown for food. I mean, this is, we can all take a stab at this. Mark?
Yeah, I'm seeing a combination of answers,
Okay.
things you've already presented, but I guess the question is, could we possibly live through the entire winter without shipping things in? That's open to anybody.
I can. It's only because I have a farm. No, but I think you absolutely can. You have to have that mindset though, while everything is growing and while you have everything. The freezer is a great modern technology and canning as that you can preserve pretty much anything that it is that you're able to get seasonally and eat that all through the winter. I think that is, you know, that there is a way to do that.
And I'll add, fermentation is a great preservation technique. We have a cold frame that we built entirely from salvaged objects, including a wonderful, huge old door from someone had by the side of the door that was a big glass panel. And that extends my growing season. I don't do a lot of growing, but it extends the growing season on the herbs and tomatoes. And I think I have a Brussels sprout plant out there that is still going fine. Cold frames are wonderful. We're in Long Island. I grew up in Canada. They have a short summer season.
Yeah, also the cold frames, and you know, it is a mindset, like Tom said. I mean, we do eat totally seasonally, and you know, save things for your pasta sauce or your pizza sauce. It's fun to eat that way. It's very creative. We're one of those foodies that come into your store, Tom, and buy things. We don't want to buy the pre-prepared. We want to do it ourselves. But
my mother-in-law usually, my Italian mother-in-law usually has the energy to do all that stuff. But like one season, we must have picked like 3 or 4 extra bushels of peppers that we had, and she sliced all of them and cut them up and put them in bags and put them in the freezer. So we were enjoying, you know, the peppers freeze just fine. I mean, it was great.
Unbelievable. I know.
So, but you just have to be thinking ahead of time. You can't just think at the moment, what am I going to eat tonight? You got to really take advantage of those opportunities that you have to preserve.
Or you have your must-go soup from the fridge.
Yeah.
Somebody brought up the idea of root cellars. I don't know if I've ever seen one. Anybody want to tackle that?
I have a two-car garage at the farm. It was our farm that we bought was an old potato farmer. And, you know, potatoes are either stored in a cement building that's heavily insulated, or this was kind of pretty deep under the 2-car garage that they would put potatoes down and then put them on a conveyor to get up. So it's kind of cool down there. And I'm just looking for trying to get the right humidity to kind of use that. But when we went to, before we had the farm was the last time we really had a vacation. So 10 years ago, we went to Italy, and we were up in, where was it? Northern Italy, and there was on a goat farm up in the mountains, and the government was incentivizing somebody to take over this farm and to kind of run goats, and basically giving it to them for free to use it, as long as they were, you know, growing food and everything. And we went up there, and this guy had a root cellar. Oh my goodness, it was 80, 90 degrees outside. It was 55 degrees down in the root cellar. So it's definitely, it's simple. It's ancient technology that people should be using more. So it's just digging a hole and putting some cement in there. Yeah.
Ellen, you had something to add to that? I'm sorry.
I covet one. I don't have one. My house doesn't even have a cold zone. We're right now using an unheated part of the attic to store the pumpkins, the apples, and I think they're quince up there. But it fluctuates too much. I've coveted a root cellar for quite some time, but I haven't built one yet. I
Chef
want to
Casey,
keep bugs and roots out.
I'm sorry. Chef Casey, there's a question about when you're choosing things to buy, how do you avoid plastic? I know you probably don't go to a grocery store for all of this stuff, but especially during the pandemic when everybody's noticeably germ-phobic right now, how do we avoid the plastic, and how do we avoid packaging in plastic even locally?
Yeah, understood. I'm a big fan of, I have so many handmade bags, you know, in my vehicle. I even have a few connected to my bicycle if I'm out on the bike and passing by a farm stand. I mean, that's a huge way to even just those thin plastic bags that they offer everyone at the supermarket. I always try to steer everyone clear of those. It's really a conscious decision to try to avoid using them, but to have something on hand, whether it's, you know, in your vehicle or, you know, connected to your bike. It's more of a mindset that we have to get into. When I'm ordering large quantities from a farm stand, I usually tell them to, you know, reuse boxes that they, you know, got seeds in or things of that nature. And I will reuse those cardboard boxes as well, just so they have multiple uses out of them. So we're not creating, you know, more plastic waste.
Fabulous. A fabulous panel, everyone. Thank you so much. It really very inspiring. And I just want to remind people it's a wonderful thing to eat locally, seasonally, organic, regeneratively, and reducing your food waste. You really feel great, and you're meeting the climate goals. It's #1 of the drawdown solutions for households. And thank you for this great panel. Really appreciate you guys joining me.